In the beginning, there was silence. Then came ham radio. And there came the great exchange of ideas that led to many new inventions like the cell phone and communications that leads to lifelong friendships from down the street to around the world with millions of other amateur radio operators. And today's ham radio is the best source of backup communications during disasters or emergencies. Ham radio is alive and well. Find out more and get in on all the action.
From Australia, this is the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
And with the national news for week commencing June 5, 2022, I'm Graham, VK4BB. This program recorded in Brisbane, Olympic City 2032. Yes, built on Australia's east coast for Australian electronic enthusiasts and heard globally. Starting our news this week, murdered ham radio operator VK3VZP update. The man accused of killing two campers who disappeared whilst on a trip in the Victorian High Country is facing delays in his case, a court has been told. Gregory Stewart Lynn is charged with 2 counts of murder and faced the Sale Magistrates Court for an administrative hearing on Tuesday. The 55-year-old is accused of killing Russell Hill and Carol Clay whilst they were camping at the Woonongatta Valley on March 20, 2020. The last known contact before they vanished was when Mr Hill, VK3VZP, was heard via HF radio stating he was in fact in the valley. In WIA news, and Justin VK7 Tango Whiskey dropped a note to say, not sure if someone has highlighted that last WIA broadcast year was the highest number of callbacks since the formation of the national WIA. Well spotted, Justin, and so it's thanks again to all who tune each week. Not well spotted was the line in last week's news where Vice President Lee Moyle's item on Dayton and how he and fellow director Chris met with other national societies was self-funded and was not funded by the WIA. You'd be surprised at how many queries on this arrived at the news desk this week. So listen up once again.
Good morning from WIA Vice President Lee Moyle, VK3GK. Last weekend, new WIA Director Chris Dimitrovic, VK3FY, and Lee Moyle, VK3GK, attended Dayton Hamvention in Ohio, USA. Director Chris and Lee took the opportunity to meet with other international peak body representatives such as the IWRL, RSGB, DARC, and IARU. They discussed the potential changes to our VK licensing structure, high-power proposals, examination processes, amongst many other things. Lee commented that it was great to meet AWRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, and AWRL FCC Counsel David Siddle, K3ZJ. Early discussions were had about reciprocal licensing processes, along with CPT and HAREC compliance. The WIA will be following up on the ongoing Zoom meetings to solidify the relationships. Although this trip was partially official WIA business, it was totally self-funded by both Chris and Lee, and as such, no WIA members' funds were used. So good luck and good DX for the weekend. That's it for this week. 7-3 from Lee, VK3GK.
Thanks, Lee. And here in Australia, under 18s can now take ham radio exam online. Your WIA recently received official AMC documentation confirming a shift in amateur radio remote exam procedure. Previously, under the constraints of UTAS policy, anyone under the age of 18 years of age was unable to sit an online remote amateur radio exam session. Now, as you can imagine, this policy had quite a negative impact on the ability to bring youth into the amateur service, especially during the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic and lockdowns that ensured us face-to-face exam sessions were extremely restricted or just not allowed. This change will also be in conjunction to the proposed fully online examination service AMC have been proposing to be released for use later this year. The WIA thanks the AMC/UTAS for their consideration in amending their exam policy, as this simple change is a big win for the AMC assessors, WIA and the amateur radio service in Australia. Well done, those folk at the WIA.
This is the home service of the Wireless Institute of Australia through VK1 WIA. Now international news with Jason, Victor Kilo 2, Lima Alpha Whiskey.
Hello, leading this week's international news from Region 1, Golden Globe Race. This event sees boats endeavouring to circumnavigate the globe. The race starts from France the 4th of September. All entrants must navigate using only old technology, no GPS or computer laptop allowed, with only a sextant in hand and the stars to navigate the way around the globe. Participants will be allowed to use radio directional finding RDF navigation. The Irish Radio Transmitters Society was founded in 1932, and this year the society celebrates its 90th birthday. To mark the occasion, the society has secured the special call sign EI90IRTS. Since its initial use, the call sign has attracted multiple pile-ups on all bands and modes it's been used on. So, the one to tune for, EI90IRTS. Felix will have more DX news in a tick, so stay tuned for Felix's 4-2 tune when he opens his DX window. In news from Region 2, IWRL honoured by Masons in Newington, Connecticut. Freemasons of the Sequin Level Lodge No. 140, located in Newington, have recognised the IWRL with a presentation. The special recognition was organised and led by the Lodge's Worshipful Master John Farson, Alpha 1 Echo Zulu, who is also a member of the IWRL staff, serving as a membership services representative in the Membership Marketing and Communications Department. Farson and his fellow Masons organised the event to recognise IWRL for its contribution to the Newington community and its role in serving IWRL members and radio amateurs worldwide. Newington Mayor Beth Del Buono participated in the presentation, issuing an official town proclamation honouring IWRL. While IWRL was established in Hartford in 1914, the association settled in Newington when construction started on a new headquarters station in 1937 on its current 7-acre site. Moving IWRL station to Newington followed President Hiram P. Maxim's death in February 1936 and the Great Flood in New England that destroyed the station located in Hartford a month earlier. The new station opened in 1938, operating with Maxim's call sign, Whiskey 1 Alpha Whiskey, which was granted to IWRL by the FCC as a permanent memorial to him. How will Superman get on? Well, it was a melancholy Monday this week in the Big Apple, as the last public payphone was uprooted from Midtown Manhattan near Times Square and hauled away like so much garbage. That ought to be in a museum, you're thinking. Well, don't worry, that's exactly where the last pair is headed. Back some 8 years ago, the New York City mayor of the time started and pledged to move the concept of street-level public utility into the future. Since then, NYC's payphones have been systematically replaced with roughly 2,000 Wi-Fi kiosks that provide free domestic phone calls, device charging, and of course, internet access. They also give weather, transit updates and neighbourhood news. There are still a few private payphones around the city, so Superman still has some places to change. But if you need to make a phone call and have nowhere to turn, a Wi-Fi kiosk is the way to go. Last week here on WIA National News, WIA Vice President Lee, VK3GK, filled us in on his Dayton trip and mentioned the annual Dayton Contest Dinner. This saw the induction of 2 new members into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. Recipient David Pascoe, KM3T, is well known for his championships and record scores, as well as his charitable work as a volunteer pilot for those with medical needs. Craig Thompson, K9CT, developer of the North American Collegiate Championship program, was the other recipient, recognised for his work with Contest University and numerous other initiatives. CQ's Amateur Radio Hall of Fame added 7 new names, 3 of whom are silent keys. They are the late jazz pianist Robert Ringwald, K6YBV, Franklin Antonio, N6NKF, philanthropist and co-founder of chipmaker Qualcomm, Wolf Haranth, OE1WHC, OE3WHC, Radio Austria International broadcast journalist. Scott Wright, K0MD, Mayo Clinic physician leading the team developing COVID-19 treatment with convalescent plasma. Peter Marks, AB3XC, the physician leading the team at the US Food and Drug Administration overseeing COVID-19 vaccines, treatment and testing. Les Kramer, WA3SGZ, developer of prosthetic devices for lower limbs. Ray Llewellyn, W7EL, author of the Easy NEC antenna modelling software that has set standards for ham radio antenna design. Congrats all from here in the land down under. In news from Region 3, this story and the lander originated from Region 3, but concluding this week's international news, it's to the moon. Just how far would you be willing to go to get away from RFI? This story was originally filed for Amateur Radio Newsline by our own news editor Graham, VK4BB.
There were high hopes for the radio telescope aboard China's Chang'e 4 lander when it touched down on the dark side of the moon 3 years ago. Chinese scientists believed that such a remote, unilluminated location would be free of radio noise because the moon is a shield against RFI from the Earth. But they were wrong about the absence of noise altogether. However, the low-frequency radio spectrometer on board the lander's relay satellite cannot do its work to unlock the mysteries of the universe until another mystery is solved: how to block the noise from the moon lander's own radio emissions. Knowing early on that these emissions would pose an issue, scientists took preventive measures, but they apparently have not succeeded. One of the causes is apparently the electromagnetic leakage from the lander's power source. According to an academic paper cited in the South China Morning Post, the lander's noises are 2 to 3 times greater than the signals that the radio telescope had hoped to observe, and even block the strongest pulses emitted by the sun. Researchers are now studying a mathematical solution that they hope will boost the sensitivity of the radio telescope, which is designed to receive frequencies under 30 megahertz. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Graham Kemp, VK4BB, and, as an aside, according to Chinese mythology, their goddess of the moon bears the name Chang'e.
RFI in the Shaky Isles. Recently, RSM had the opportunity to put one of their new remote RF sensors to the test. A licence holder in Wanganui was experiencing intermittent interference, and tracking it down was proving difficult. After several trips, a radio investigator in Wellington decided it was time for a new approach. He installed one of the newly purchased RF sensors at the customer's premises, and this allowed RSM to monitor and record spectrum remotely. Within a short amount of time, they were able to dial into the receiver and analyse the spectrum. RSM were able to determine a nearby transmission was active whenever the interference occurred. Using this information, the customer was able to locate the offending transmitter and install appropriate filters. This was a great result for both the customer and RSM, and a fantastic example of how remote spectrum monitoring can reduce interference resolution time. For VK1 WIA National News in Sydney, I'm Jason, VK2LAW.
This is the home service of the Wireless Institute of Australia through VK1 WIA. Now operational news with Felix, VK4FUQ.
Hello there. Now contest-wise, 2022. International CQ Pride Contest on now, June 4 to 6. New Worldwide Digital Contest also June 4 to 6. VK Shires Contest 11 June 2022. WIA VHF UHF Field Days Winter 2022. 0200 hours UTC Saturday 25 June through 0159 hours UTC Sunday 26 June. Dipperson BK6. IAA HF World Championship next contest is July 9 and 10. WIA Trans-Tasman Low Band Contest 16 July 2022. The Trans-Tasman Contest, held on the third weekend in July, aims to encourage low band activity between VK and ZL. RSGB IOTA Contest is July 30-31. WIA RD or Remembrance Day Contest 2022 at Saturday, Sunday, August 13 and 14. Alara Contest August 27-28. WIA NZIAT Oceania Contest. Fun, first weekend in October, 0600 hours UTC Saturday to 0600 hours UTC Sunday. CW, second full weekend in October, 0600 hours UTC Saturday to 0600 hours UTC Sunday. WIA VHF UHF Field Days. Spring 2022 is in November. DX Window. The 4 to Lunar VK90 ABC and Aussie station celebrating 90 years of the national broadcaster and is operating all year. Rainer, using the call sign TO2AZ from Basseterre Island, Guadeloupe, between May 27 and June 10. Rainer will operate 40 to 10 metres, including 30, 17 and 12 metres, using CW and SSB. QSL to his home call DL2AAZ. JB0YU is on the air from Mongolia until the 10th of June, on the HF and VHF UHF bands, using CW, SSB and FT8 in the expedition mode. QSL via RW6HS. Listen for Rafael EA5XV, who hopes to be on the air from Panama as EA5XV/HP1, June 28 to September 12th. Listen for him on SSB. Send QSLs to his home call EA5XV. For BK1WIA National News, I'm Felix, VK4FUQ Inningham.
Across Australia from VK1WIA, you're tuned to the WIA National News Service. Here in Toowoomba, be sure to listen in on 146.750, the VK4 RDD repeater, at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. I'm Dave, VK4 DAK.
Hi, Graham, VK4BB stepping in again, this time with an item about submitting news items. This is a reminder that when supplying WIA News with Hamfest info, we obviously can't plug commercial traders on air, but we at the WIA will put your supporters in the text edition, Simples. If you'd like to submit news items for inclusion in the VK1WIA broadcasts, please email your item in text to nationalnews@wia.org.au. And don't just send URLs, links, etc., but take the time to pen your contribution. To submit audio, read How to Submit Items in the weekly news page. And we would appreciate items no longer than 2 minutes in length, as we do only have a half-hour time slot window. Remember, the sooner you do submit material, the more the likelihood of it being broadcast in the very next edition of WIA National News. Each item will only be broadcast once. If you want a couple of mentions, please submit different slants to keep your event fresh. And always, if the newsroom is to read your item, write the text in the third person.
This is the home service of the Wireless Institute of Australia through VK1WIA. Now, special interest group news with Cole, VK3GTV.
Hello and welcome to winter. Worldwide Special Interest Group News, Summits on the Air, Worldwide Flora and Fauna Program, Parks on the Air and other adventure groups. First polar activation in West Bengal in India. A 3-person team has activated the first island park, VU0107, Sabuji Provincial Recreational Area. The team comprised VU3XRY, VU3YDA, VU3JXF and made several contacts using 20, 40, 15 and 10 metre bands. Digital communication was also practiced using FT8. The event was supported by West Bengal Radio Club and Parks on the Air India community. Arunava Day VU3XRY says he's delighted to let you know that every day new parks are being added and all the Indian ham community will support this polar activity and take the hobby to the fields. The hobby of amateur radio and portable operating in particular will receive some high-profile coverage this Sunday, the 5th of June, on national UK television. The long-running BBC Country File programme airs at 6 p.m. on the main BBC One channel and will be based from Flatholme Island in the Bristol Channel. The location can claim to be the birthplace of radio, as it was the site of Marconi's first radio transmissions overseas. Presenters will be with leading Summits on the Air operator Ben Lloyd, GW4BML, as he sets up a portable station on the island in order to contact SOTA activators on hill and mountain summits around the world. Special interest group news, Alara. Don't forget that Alara contest Felix told us about. The Alara contest for this year happens August 27 and 28 under the guidance of Alara contest manager Maria, VK5MAZ. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, ATV. tinyurl.com/WIA-news-videos. That link is a video version of this news, compiled each week by VK5BD Bevan. If you missed the link details, no problem. You can find it on the news page at wia.org.au or search Bevan's YouTube channel by his call sign, VK5BD. Remember to click like, and you can also subscribe to be notified when Bevan uploads each week's video, and it can also be seen on amateur TV stations. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Final Frontier. We have lots of OTA acronyms here, and here's another one. NOTA, NASA on the air. It's back. Amateur radio club stations at NASA field centres have reactivated joint operations. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory Amateur Radio Club is on the air with two special event stations, W6JPL and W6VIO. The NASA on the Air NOTA 2022 special event runs through till December 31st. NOTA 2022 is coordinated across all of NASA Centre amateur radio clubs, and you can verify your NOTA 2022 contacts and download your NOTA 2022 certificate made with the NASA Amateur Radio Clubs at the link in this week's WIA News Text Edition. With over a dozen differing sites and clubs, instead of reading them all out again, I direct you to read our text news at wia.org.au. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, IOTA, Islands on the Air, ZL7 Chatham Island. Jeff, K5WE will be active as ZL7/K5WE from the north coast of Chatham Island beginning September 7th through September 21st, 2022. He'll operate all bands 160 through to 10 metres using CW, FT8, FT4, SSB and RITI modes, QSL via club logs, OQRS or K5WE. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Radio Amateur Oldtimers. With the latest RAOTC news, it's over now to Clive, VK6CSW.
Hello everyone, this is Clive, VK6 Charlie Sierra Whiskey, reminding you that tomorrow is the first Monday of the month, time for the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia's June Bulletin to go to air. As well as the latest club news, this month's talks are entitled Humboldt, a Forgotten Scientist, Arabian Highways and What is Light. Everyone, RAOTC members and non-members alike, is most welcome to listen to the programme and to join in the callbacks afterwards. There are many different transmission frequencies, times and modes. To find one that best suits you, visit the RAOTC website www.raotc.org.au or just Google RAOTC broadcasts for full details. If none of the transmission times suit you, you can download the audio file at any time from today from the website. Members and friends of the RAOTC in Perth are reminded that the next lunchtime meeting at the Bayswater Hotel is on Tuesday, June the 14th. All are welcome, but if you'd like more details, please email coordinator Phil VK6ZKO at pbcasper@bigpond.com. That's Papa Bravo Charlie Alpha Sierra Papa Echo Romeo, pbcasper@bigpond.com. 7-3 from Clive, VK6CSW.
Thanks, Clive. Once again, tune in tomorrow for the June RAOTC Bulletin. Enjoy the program and please join in the callbacks afterwards. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, YOTA, Youngsters on the Air. As we've heard here on WIA National News, recent discussions by WIA with ACMA and AMC have enabled AMC, University of Tasmania, to amend their amateur radio examination policy to allow under-18s to sit exams via remote. The WIA thanks the AMC UTAS for their consideration in amending their exam policy, as this simple change is a big win for the AMC, AMC assessors, WIA and the amateur radio service in Australia. Now over to IARU Region 2. Youth on the Air Camp 2022 on the air and streaming selected events. The camp for young amateur radio operators in North, Central and South America will operate special event station W8Y throughout the camp from June 12 to 17 and will stream the opening and closing ceremonies on YouTube. YODA campers will be operating special event station W8Y from both the National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting in Ohio as well as the Camp Hotel. The opening and closing ceremonies will be streamed live on the Youth on the Air YouTube channel. The opening ceremony is Sunday, June 12 from 2100 Zulu to 2230 Zulu and will feature keynote speaker Dr. Nathaniel Frizzle, W2NAF, the founder of Ham SCI. The closing ceremony is Friday, June 17 from 1700 Zulu to 1800 Zulu. The channel will also feature a daily highlight video spotlighting the activities of the previous day. For additional information, please contact Camp Director Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. And now with further YODA news from our area, here's Alec, VK2APC.
Thank you, Cole. YODA Oceanianet. There is a net for us YODA operators every Monday starting at 0700 UTC, which is 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Net control is Thomas ZL3TOM operating ZL6 YODA. Amateurs of all ages are welcome to join the net as it's for young and experienced amateur radio operators alike who want to have a place to be and have fun. We talk about technology and what has been happening in the tech world. We also discuss the latest radio-related news and help those who need help with their tech issues or to offer advice on a project someone is running or their technology gadgets. Operators are free to share their own news and even what they have been working on too. You can join the net through Echolink, Allstar, or IRLP. Please see the text edition of the news for connection details and the website for more information. For VK1 WIA National News, I'm Alec, VK2 APC in Sydney. Now back over to you, Cole.
Thanks, Alec. Now on to Worldwide Special Interest Group Military. Recordings of military transmissions can be found on the Signal Identification Guide wiki in our text editions. Expedition to the 5 Normandies landing beaches. On air this week, but concluding today, June 5, Mary has been active as F5 PFP portable from the 5 Normandy landing beaches, which for World War II were named Sword, Juno, Gold, Utah and Omaha. Also with a military theme from Malta is 9H6 CAP, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the destruction of the Capuchin Monastery and the church in a World War II bomb attack in Floriana, Malta, and ceases operations June 30th. QSL via 9HICJ direct only. And that wraps up the segment for this week. And speaking of wrapping up, I trust everyone is nice and warm, especially those facing chilly weather in the southern states. I'm Cole, VK3GTV.
This is VK1WIA. All points of contacts from today's news stories are to be found in print when you read the web editions, www.wia.org.au.
And here we be, the 2022 social scene, with a little one for 2023 thrown in for good measure. And we've got a new one in the calendar. It happens in VK3. It's the Rosebud Radio Fest. Happens at 9:30 a.m. November the 20th. Then, next weekend, in VK2, the Oxley Region Amateur Radio Club's Field Day. And in VK5, Australian Fox Hunting Championship and the SERG Convention. That happens at Mount Gambier. Then, the one I mentioned in 2023, Alara Meet 2023, happens November 4th and 5th of November. It happens in Hobart. Now till next we meet, I'm Graham, VK4, Baker. Walk softly.
From Australia, this has been the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
Courtesy of Bevan, VK5 BD's ATV and YouTube channel, this has been WIA National News. We're back now, live and local, and your voice, your callbacks. And don't forget, tick like.
Hello listeners and friends of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club. It's the first Monday of a new month and it's time therefore for our monthly news and information bulletin, this one being for June 2022, and it's coming to you from VK3OTN, the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia Incorporated. I trust that you've all been well. Weather conditions have been a little odd in different parts of the country, but we seem to have survived. We thank you for your comments last month. Many of you mentioned that you were very happy with the new voices that you heard. So I'm sorry this month to load you with my voice again, but may I also add at this point that this will be my last official broadcast for RAOTC. I've helped out over quite a few years now. I've been very happy to do it, I've enjoyed it, and I hope that the articles that I've presented for you have been of some interest to you. Obviously not all the time, but along the way. I'm also quite happy to admit that in times gone by there have been serious technical issues with my presentation of the final file. I hope I'm forgiven for that, but we seem now to have got all that sorted out at long last. I think it's time to step back now and let other people guide the future of these broadcasts. So anyway, for the time being, here is this month's program. As usual, we begin this broadcast with a sincere vote of thanks to all the relayers of this monthly program. We've mentioned before, it's not easy to get people to commit to this task every month, but we're always on the lookout for anyone at all who may be prepared to help. If you can, please get in touch. Club news. We're very pleased indeed to say a sincere welcome to RAOTC to Fred Elliott, VK3ZAQ. Fred became new full RAOTC member number 1834 on the 18th of May 2022. Fred often calls in on the Melbourne 2-metre callback, and I hope that he will do so after this broadcast. Nevertheless, greetings to you, Fred, and a sincere welcome to the club. Now, apart from that one item of news, I've not heard anything else at the time of compiling this file. So if there is any other club news, I'm hoping that one of the other broadcast team members will insert it now. You are listening to VK3OTN, the station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia. So moving on to our talks for this month. A few years ago, I recorded a talk about a scientist named Humboldt. Now, at the mention of that name, you may immediately think of an ocean current. But however, this particular man was never given the recognition that he really deserved. And this will immediately alert you to the fact that there have been several references in recent times to scientists who made quite major contributions to the field of knowledge but were never really recognised at large. So, here's Mr. Humboldt. See what you make of this. Our talk this month is entitled simply A Forgotten Man of Science. On the 14th of September 1869, worldwide celebrations marked 100 years since the birth of a much-loved, highly revered scientist. There were speeches and festivities in Buenos Aires, Mexico City, Moscow and Melbourne. In almost every major US city, thousands attended concerts and parades. Some 25,000 people gathered in New York's Central Park for the unveiling of a commemorative statue and a torchlight parade. In Berlin, the man's hometown, offices were closed for the day and 80,000 people came out in spite of the torrential rain. It's hard to know what's more astounding, that a scientist could inspire such popular and passionate celebration, or that he should be very nearly forgotten today. The scientist was Alexander von Humboldt. If you've never heard of him, you can be forgiven. In the 150 years since his international commemoration, he has all but disappeared from the general consciousness. Being German, Prussian in fact, hasn't helped. Not in the English-speaking world anyway. But more than this, perhaps, is that Humboldt has no single theory or equation bearing his name. Rather, he is responsible for a broad scientific concept that is now so widely accepted that it comes as a surprise to us that anyone had to think of it. You might say that Humboldt is the father of environmental science. It was he who first developed a scientific understanding of ecosystems and how everything on the planet, living and non-living, is linked in myriad relationships. One comparatively small innovation of Humboldt's goes a long way to capturing the nature of his thinking and his influence. Today, no weather report is complete without a map showing temperature zones across the country. This simple, powerful idea of aggregating temperatures, or rainfall, or humidity, or any other measurement, and displaying it graphically perfectly demonstrates Humboldt's holism. In contrast to numerical lists of data, a map with isotherms shows the regions of temperature, and that immediately gives us insights into their causes and effects. For instance, the relationships between altitude and land cover, to winds and ocean currents, and to the life forms that inhabit these areas. Immediately we begin to comprehend our planet as a single whole comprised of interlocking systems. This is the core of Humboldt's vision. It's a similar story with his Naturgemälde, roughly translated as nature paintings. Best known is the diagram of Chimborazo, an Andean volcano he climbed. Alongside illustrations of the changing zones of flora and fauna on each side of the mountain are data on temperature, pressure and humidity. Again, the emphasis is on nature's interconnectedness, the different forms of life stratified according to altitude and other physical factors. While his greatest legacy is his sweeping idea about the interconnectedness of the world, it would be wrong to see Humboldt as only a big-picture man. Much of this work was based on measurements, lots of them. In this sense, Humboldt was pure scientist, using the best technology of the day to measure everything he could: temperature, humidity, the magnetic field, the colour of the sky. And alongside this were observations of rock and soil, the taste of the water, fungi, insects, plants, animals and people. All of this he brought together to show the links of dependency that crisscross the natural world, including human dependencies on that world. But even more than all this, Humboldt, infused with the spirit of German Romanticism, made a conscious effort to keep all of his senses open, to see, smell and feel, to experience personally every aspect of the world. For him, there was no conflict between the objectivity of rigorous scientific measurement and the subjectivity of fully acknowledging, even indulging in, his emotional responses. And these were intense, unsurprising, given that he could find himself deep in a remote, dense, wet jungle one month and on the side of a volcano the next. This likely explains a good part of Humboldt's popularity, that he wrote of these experiences, allowing readers in Europe and the young United States to become, in their imaginations, adventurers themselves. Reading his most popular work, Personal Narrative of Travels to the Equinoctial Regions of the New Continent during the years 1799 to 1804, they could suffer the privations but also see the vistas, feeling something of the thrill of being the first to explore a new continent. Certainly this was the effect the book had on young Charles Darwin. He was hugely influenced by Humboldt, and in many respects came to see the world through Humboldt's eyes when, with the personal narrative at his side, he embarked upon his own adventure on the Beagle years later. Humboldt made two major expeditions in his life. The first was to modern-day Venezuela, Colombia and Peru, and then Cuba and Mexico from 1799 to 1804. The second was to Russia in 1829. It was the former that was most influential, however, for the impact it had on Humboldt and for the influence he had on the world. South America at the start of the 19th century was made up of colonies still firmly in the grip of Spain. Humboldt observed this with the same unique blend of objectivity and heart that he applied to the natural world. He documented statistics of production and income and recorded social conditions. And just as his insights into ecosystems now form part of the general consensus, the views he formed about Latin American society and economics seem thoroughly modern. Colonialization was brutal and disastrous, he concluded. The treatment of indigenous peoples, wrongly characterized as savages, cruel and unjustifiable, and slavery was a particular evil. His political essay on the Kingdom of New Spain, which laid out these views along with the evidence, was widely read. Humboldt's protestations had a material effect on political change, helping build pressure that eventually led to the liberation of the South and Central American colonies. But they came with a price. His anti-colonial views are almost certainly the reason that the British never allowed him to travel to India, where he long wished to mount an expedition. He wanted to gather evidence that he was confident would confirm, in a quite different part of the world, the broad ecological conclusions he had made from his observations in South America. The Russian expedition sufficed, but was a consolation prize. Viewed in hindsight, Humboldt seems very much the modern man. In many ways he could slip easily into the intellectual world of the 21st century and be quite comfortable. At the same time, he was absolutely pivotal in his own time and place. He was a man who counted Goethe and Thomas Jefferson as personal friends, as well as Simon Bolivar, who went on to liberate Latin America from Spain. Humboldt dominated the world of science for decades and provided incredible influence and inspiration. As a concrete example, he was the primary inspiration that eventually led to the creation of national parks around the world. He was also a great public communicator. As Andrea Wolf writes in The Invention of Nature, The Adventures of Alexander von Humboldt, the Lost Hero of Science, in Berlin in 1827, he held free public lectures that were hugely popular. Attendees included academics and students, royalty, members of the public from all classes, and women. In fact, they comprised half the audience. It's likely that no such mix of people had ever gathered before, certainly not on equal terms, and all were equally enthralled and informed. It is a great testament to the democratic principles Humboldt espoused. For Humboldt, these lectures provided the opportunity to assemble his thoughts for their final and complete expression in his magnum opus, the 5-volume Cosmos, which he worked on until his death. The word cosmos Humboldt resurrected from Greek, where it means beauty and order. For him, it stood for everything in heaven and on earth. Today, we would do well to resurrect Humboldt's legacy. He still has a lot to tell us. Here was a man who in 1830 listed deforestation, irrigation, and the great masses of steam and gas produced by industry as posing serious problems for the planet. How sadly true has his insight proved to be? This is VK3OTN with our monthly news and information bulletin from the Old Timers Club. Now you know that this year the emphasis in our talks each month has been on historical articles. Well, right now I'm going to be bold and try and mix together something old and something new. A few months ago I found an article in an Australian science magazine that spoke about discoveries taking place in the Middle East, discoveries of an ancient nature. And I thought you may be interested to hear about this because, as I say, it combines something old with something under research today. Australian archaeologists discover ancient Arabian highways. A team of archaeologists from the University of Western Australia has discovered a network of ancient superhighways, long-distance corridors linking oases and pastures built by the Bronze Age inhabitants of northwest Arabia. Quote, funerary avenues were the major highway networks of their day and show that the populations living in the Arabian Peninsula 4,500 years ago were far more socially and economically connected to one another than we previously thought. End of quote, says Matthew Dalton, leading author of the study and an archaeologist from University of Western Australia's School of Humanities. The research, published in the journal Holocene in December, involved taking satellite images of these avenues, which scar the countryside across an area of 160,000 square kilometres. The authors found more than 11,000 of the 17,800 pendant tombs found in the regions were placed on these causeways, and that the highest concentration of funerary monuments on the avenues was located near permanent water sources. Based on the locations and pathways of the ancient highways, the team thinks populations used them to travel long distances between major oases like Khaybar, Al-Ula and Tamar. Lesser avenues also trail into the surrounding landscapes, which the team thinks hints at herds of domestic animals being moved to nearby pastures with the swell and flow of seasons and drought. Quote, "These oases, especially Khaybar, exhibit some of the densest concentrations of funerary monuments known worldwide," says Mr. Dalton. "The sheer number of Bronze Age tombs built around them suggests that populations had already begun to settle more permanently in these favourable locations at this time." End of quote. Hugh Thomas, director of the project, says that the study is part of a swathe of information revolutionising traditional understandings of Bronze Age Arabia. Quote, "The papers published in 2021 have helped demonstrate that in ancient times Al-Ula and Khaybar were characterised by a rich and dynamic occupational landscape," Mr. Thomas says. "The archaeological finds coming out of these regions have the potential to profoundly change our understanding of the early history of the Middle East." End of quote. As I said at the commencement of that talk, something old trying to be mixed with something new. This is VK3OTN with the monthly news and information bulletin from the Old Timers Club. So far, our talks this month are a little on the short side, so I thought I'd throw in an extra one for you. Here's a little article from a Melbourne science writer, Cathal O'Connell. Rather unusual Christian name of Cathal, C-A-T-H-A-L, Cathal O'Connell. It's called What is Light? Imagine you're in a park looking at a leaf on the branch of a tree. We know light bounces off the leaf to your eye to tell you it's green. But what is light exactly? Two early ideas come from the 17th century. English scientist Isaac Newton thought light was made up of little particles, he called them corpuscles, emitted by hot objects, such as the sun or fire, while his contemporary, the Dutch physicist Christian Huygens, thought light was a kind of wave vibrating up and down as it moved forward. Still, neither of them had a concept of what light really was. Newton had no idea what his corpuscles were made of. Huygens had no concept of what was waving. Incidentally, the question of whether a photon is a particle or wave has never been fully resolved. We can trace the first steps toward understanding light's makeup to a bench top in Copenhagen in 1820, where Danish scientist Hans Christian Ørsted was giving a lecture on electricity. A compass happened to be sitting near the battery he was using in his demonstration, and he noticed the compass needle suddenly jerking when he switched the battery on or off. This meant electricity and magnetism were related, or, as it was more formally described later, a changing electric field creates a magnetic field. Then 11 years later, English scientist Michael Faraday discovered the opposite rang true, that a changing magnetic field also creates an electric field. It was the Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell who collected these ideas about electricity and magnetism, plus a few others, and pulled them together into one coherent theory of electromagnetism. But Maxwell's most celebrated insight was when he combined the work of Ørsted and Faraday to explain the essence of light. He realized that a changing electric field could create a changing magnetic field, which would then create another electric field, and so on. The result would be a self-sustaining electromagnetic field, endlessly repeating, travelling incredibly fast. How fast? Maxwell was able to calculate this too at about 300 million metres each second, pretty close to what had recently been measured for the speed of light. And so this is what light is, an electric field tied up with a magnetic field flying through space. You can think of the two fields as dance partners, wrapped up in an eternal embrace. To keep self-generating, both electric and magnetic components need to stay in step. It takes two to tango. Now, we know that there is a whole spectrum of electromagnetic waves, each distinguished by their wavelength. At the short end, high-energy gamma rays can have a wavelength much smaller than a hydrogen atom, while at the long end, low-energy radio waves can be as long as the planet Jupiter is wide. Visible light is a very thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, from wavelengths of about 400 to 700 billionths of a metre, about the width of an E. coli bacterium, or about 1% the width of a human hair. You might wonder why we can see this range of light and not other wavelengths. There are two main reasons for this. First, vision usually involves some kind of chemical reaction triggered by light. The carbon-based chemistry of our cells happens to be kicked off by light of around the visible range. Longer wavelengths don't carry enough pep to set off the reactions, while light of shorter wavelengths carries too much energy and can damage the delicate chemistry of life, which is why ultraviolet light causes sunburn, for instance. Second, the 400 to 700 nanometer range can travel quite far in water before it gets absorbed, which is why a cup of water looks transparent to us. Almost all visible light passes through. The first eyes evolved under the sea, and so this range of light held the most evolutionary advantage compared with other wavelengths. And so back to the park. When you look at the leaf, the light entering your eye is a wave of electricity and magnetism of a particular wavelength. The light hits your retina and sets off a particular pattern of chemical changes in your cone cells, which your brain recognises as green. So the next time you see someone with nice eyes, you can compliment them on their beautiful electromagnetic wave detectors. Our joke this month is not a very long one. Perhaps it could be argued that it's a quip rather than a joke, but we always like to finish off with something funny for you, so here's today's effort. Visiting a shopping mall, a couple agreed to go their separate ways and rendezvous in an hour. So while he visited the sports shop, she hit the major clothes store. When he met up with her as arranged outside the clothes store, she was carrying a dozen bags full of items. "Have you bought all that?" he asked incredulously. "Well, yes," she said. Then, waving towards the interior of the shop, she added, "But look at all the stuff I'm leaving behind." Well, there you are, listeners. My thanks to those with whom I've worked over the years, and my thanks to you for your support of our monthly broadcasts. Please pass the word around that they are still heard each month, and let the doings of the club be known far and wide. I shall remain a strong supporter of RAOTC, and I hope from time to time to produce articles for use by the broadcast committee if they so desire. 73 to you from me, Ian VK3 Juliet Sierra, on behalf of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club. We're now standing by for callbacks on those relays that have an operator available. Take care, and we will catch up again sometime soon. This is VK3OTN, the station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia, Incorporated.
We're coming down from some fast solar wind that bumped us up to storm levels, and more is on the way. Those stories and more in the news this week. This space weather forecast is sponsored in part by Millersville University. Come get certified in broadcast space weather. Visit millersville.edu/SWEN. Space weather this week continues to be a bit on the calm side. As we take a look at our Earth-facing disk, you can see that big crescent-shaped coronal hole. That has been sending us some fast solar wind over the past couple days, and it's bumped us up to storm levels and kind of kept us there for a day or so. But this region now is rotating off of the Earth-facing disk, and therefore things are beginning to calm down. But never fret, aurora photographers. There is yet another coronal hole that's going to be rotating into the Earth strike zone here about in the next 4 or 5 days, and that could get us yet another burst of fast solar wind and more aurora chances. So just hang in there. Now also we have only 3 active regions on the Earth-facing disk right now, region 30, 23, 24, and 25. Only region 30, 25 is a big flare player, but it's only a scotia of a big flare player. So things have definitely calmed down when it comes to solar flares and also solar flux. We're actually struggling to keep up into the triple digits, and that will easily continue over the next few days, possibly over a week before things begin to get a little bit better. Meanwhile, as we take a look at the far side of the sun, this is stereo A, and it's staring at the sun just a little bit from the side. You can see all of the activity. It's just a lot of little puffs, These are small little mini solar storms that are being launched pretty much every direction except towards Earth. And we do have a big bright region that looks like it's beginning to rotate into stereo's view, but as it rotates into view, man, it looks like it's kind of fizzled out. So this might have been a big region maybe a week ago on the sun's far side. In fact, I believe it launched a few solar storms, but it looks like it's kind of lost its muster. And so as it rotates into Earth view, don't expect any huge boost in the solar flux. So for amateur radio operators and emergency responders, it looks like radio propagation is going to remain kind of just hovering in the triple digits. The nice thing means, however, is that there is not going to be any risk for big radio blackouts. And now for your Leo, Meo, Geo orbit outlook. As we take a look at our low energy particle environment, these are the particles that can gather on the outside of spacecraft and cause surface charging and other types of electrical discharges. We can see late on the 27th, we can see particle injections kind of beginning to build that flux up in GEO as well as clear down deep into the MEO environment. In fact, we're beginning to see surface charging issues from our radiation clock, especially in the post-midnight pre-dawn sector. And this lasts easily through the 28th, and by the 29th, things begin to kind of settle down a little bit with these low energy particles. But when we flip to our higher energy particles, now these are the ones that cause internal charging because they can penetrate deep into the spacecraft and cause electrical upsets from the inside. Taking a look at these particles at 1 MeV, you can actually see right around the 28th, these particles actually get flushed. You can see that because the radiation belts here in this figure actually turns really blue. But very shortly thereafter, we begin to build those particles back up, and you can see the radiation belts beginning to get really intense. And this goes deep into the MEO orbits, cleared down at about 2 Earth radii, all the way out to GEO. And these particles are going to continue to intensify over the next day or two. So you satellite operators, especially in MEO and GEO orbits, expect internal charging could be an issue over the next few days. Switching to our moon, we are now passing through the new moon phase on our way to a first quarter, and by the 5th, the moon will still be only about 30% illuminated. So you night sky watchers, if you want to catch those dim objects in the sky and possibly some aurora, now is a great time while this bright companion of ours is not quite so bright. Switching to our solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are still calming down from that fast solar wind from that big crescent-shaped coronal hole that's now kind of waning and rotating to the sun's far side. But we do have more chances later in the week for storming. In fact, at high latitudes, NOAA is expecting about active conditions as we begin to move into the weekend with up to about a 20% chance of a major storm. But this is probably going to up even higher and go into storm levels with a decent decent chance as soon as we get that new coronal hole rotating in through the Earth strike zone, which should happen sometime in the weekend. Now, at mid-latitudes, we're only expecting unsettled conditions with only about a 10% chance of active conditions, but again, this is going to likely ramp up. We could easily see active conditions as we move into the weekend and possibly a chance for more storming. So aurora photographers, definitely if you're at high latitudes, keep those batteries charged, and at mid-latitudes, possibly, if you are a determined aurora chaser, could you go out and take a look. Switching to our solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, believe it or not, everything is back into the green, and this is because we only have 3 minor flare players on the Earth-facing disk. The main one is region 3025, and NOAA is only giving it about a 5% chance of M-class flares, and that means that radio blackouts really have been calming down, and that should make GPS users very happy because the risk for radio blackouts on Earth's day side is pretty much nil. But what it also means is that the solar flux has also been taking a hit. You can see we've actually been hovering really right at the edge of triple digits. In fact, over the past couple days, we've kind of been dipping back into the high 90s for a little while. So these conditions are easily going to continue over this next week, especially as we only have very dim regions rotating into Earth view. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, you know, you're going to probably take a little bit of a hit in radio propagation, but things should still remain just on the hairy edge of good over this next week. Now, one nice thing is that because we don't have any major flare players, the proton or the radiation storm risk has really died down this week, so we're back in the D1 minor range, and this means even high-risk passengers, you have no issues worrying about when and where to fly, especially if you're a frequent flyer. Everything looks like it's all in the green. So the space weather this week continues to be a bit on the quiet side. We are calming down from that fast solar wind that brought us up to storm levels for a little while and gave us a dose of aurora. And aurora photographers, just hang in there because we're going to have yet another chance for more aurora in and around the weekend when that another coronal hole rotates into the Earth strike zone. So just, especially if you're at high latitudes, you're going to get a good chance, but even down at mid latitudes, you could get a little bit. Now, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, things are okay for you. You're probably enjoying the fact that we have less noise on the bands on the day side of Earth right now, but sadly that solar flux is dipping down just a little bit. Sometimes we're even in the high 90s instead of triple digits, so you're probably noticing radio propagation suffering just a little bit on the day side. Hang in there, we'll probably have another week of this, and then things should really begin to build back up again. But of course, with that comes radio blackouts and more noise on the band, so who knows? Well, there's always a trade-off, isn't it? Now, you GPS users, well, you know, we've got to quiet down with that solar storm going away, and we don't have a lot of solar storms on the horizon, at least not really big ones, and that solar flux has dipped back down for you. So this is a pretty good time, and we have no worries for radio blackouts, and what that means is that GPS reception pretty much all around the globe should be top-notch. I'm Tamara the Scove, the Space Weather Woman. Thank you for watching.